Today we'll be talking about the Japanese attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. So we're actually going to hit the rewind button here, and we're going to go to December 6th, 1941. So at this point, this map shows the Japanese Empire. And this says 42. This is basically before the Americans started their long advance across the Pacific. So as you can see, everything in red is owned by the Japanese at this point in time. So as you can see, they've captured Manchuria, which is the Chinese region just above, just north of Korea. They've captured Korea. They've captured the eastern civilized areas of China. They've got almost all of Southeast Asia with Burma, Ceylon, and Vietnam, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, the Philippines, New Guinea. So the question here is for the Japanese. Do they go south and try an invasion on Australia? Or do they go east and attack the Americans? And this is something that was really put up to debate for the Japanese, and as we learn, they will eventually attack the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor. So, the Japanese have perfected the art of making this new ship to the battlefield, which is called the aircraft carrier. Now, we've already talked about aircraft carriers quite a bit, but the Japanese, being an island nation, they were really the first ones to really perfect the idea and really execute it very well. And this is going to be the weapon of choice that we'd see not only at Pearl Harbor, but really a main objective for the entire war in the Pacific. Really, it's this, because without these carriers, there's no way that those German pilots can be able to, inflict as much damage as they did to the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Whether that be torpedo bombers, dive bombers, fighters, whatever it was, if Japanese pilots don't have these big ships, there's no way that there's ever a hope of attacking Pearl Harbor. We get to the attack. So we've already gone over Japan's plan. We've gone over how they're going to execute it with their aircraft carriers. So let's take a look at their target. So Pearl Harbor is obviously in Hawaii. It houses the American Pacific Naval Fleet, and it actually still is in use today. And as these torpedo bombers come down and drop their torpedoes, as the dive bombers dive, keep in mind that December 7th is a Sunday in 1941. So everyone's wondering why there's aircraft in the air, because usually everyone's off on a Sunday. And these people, these soldiers and even the citizens of Pearl Harbor are very confused. They're thinking, hey, there might be a practice drill, there might be something, because they had no idea that the Japanese had ever thought about attacking them, and here they are. So let's take a look at the legend in the left corner. So any ship in red was sunk, any yellow ship was damaged, and the blue ships are other ships that were destroyers, so smaller ships. But here's the thing, is if you look, they're targeting the bigger battleships. So the USS Arizona, which we'll talk about in a couple seconds, that was sunk. That's famous. The West Virginia battleship, the Oklahoma battleship, the California battleship was sunk. Now, they were not all completely destroyed, and even like the light cruiser Detroit up there on the northwest side. Here's the thing: is Pearl Harbor, if you've ever been to like the Louisiana Bayou or in like the Florida mangrove area, it's still ocean water, but the only thing is it's not that deep. It's only about, compared to like the rest of the ocean or even a lake, it's around only, I want to say anywhere between 10 to 25 feet. So really it's not that deep. So these big battleships when they're heavily damaged and they start to sink, the bottom of the ship hits the seafloor, or the floor of the harbor. So, I mean, that's when the USS California, for instance, actually fought in the Battle of Leyte Gulf in 1944, a full 3 years after the events of Pearl Harbor. And if you look, it says it sunk. Well, it was sunk, but they were able to lift, drain the water, and repair the California to continue fighting. Now, the problem with Pearl Harbor's plan is there's only one way in and one way out for ships. So there's no way that these ships could evade. I mean, these ships' engines weren't even started. It was an ugly, ugly sight on this island. So in total, the Japanese sunk 7 ships, and they damaged many, many more, including the battleships Nevada, Tennessee, and Maryland, and Pennsylvania. So here's the image, the famous image of the USS Arizona, and this really showcases two things, or multiple things. First, you can see the damage that the Japanese fleet can have on the Americans. So if you're actually wondering, this is one big battleship. So half the battleship is smoking black. The other half on the right is relatively undamaged. But here's the thing is, as you can see, it's tilted, it's sinking. Now here's the second point. Pearl Harbor, as I was saying, is only about... It's shallow enough to where a ship can't fully sink. So at this point, the bow of the Arizona is actually touching the water, touching the seafloor. Excuse me. So the ship is basically standing up, on the seafloor right now, and that's why it's not sunk. Typically, battleships this damaged usually sink beneath the waves, but they can't because of how shallow Pearl Harbor is. Now, this attack really enlightened the U.S. military, saying, hey, we got to up our defenses, and they eventually would. But this is the most famous image of the attack, is the battleship USS Arizona sinking and standing up on the ocean floor. We'll transition here to the current day at Pearl Harbor. So as I said, the depth at Pearl Harbor isn't that big. So right now, the Arizona, its hull, the bottom of its hull actually sits on the bottom of the harbor, and they've kind of make it stand up straight now, but you can make out everything. I mean, yeah, everything is rusted, and wildlife, under the water has done what it's done, but you can still make out. You can still see the big guns. You can still see the turrets. You can still see parts of the bridge, and you can see the rotors on the engines. You can see all of that stuff. And actually, interesting fact, I mean, you have to take a boat out to see this monument to stand over it. Now, if you served on the USS Arizona and you survived the attack, when you pass on, you can choose, in your will, you can choose to be cremated and have your ashes poured over the USS Arizona to be with their shipmates. I think that's pretty cool. It's just a nice thing that the U.S. military has done for such a traumatic event for many people. That's Pearl Harbor as a whole, and that's as far as we'll get today. Later on, we'll talk about the impacts immediately after Pearl Harbor. So remember, we have Japan before Pearl Harbor and their decision to attack the United States. We have then the aircraft carriers that were able to carry out the attack. We have the map of Pearl Harbor, and then we have the USS Arizona. Now we have the memorial of the USS Arizona. And that's all we got for today. Have a great day.